You know what old Jack Burton always says at a time like this?
Come on, then. I'll bite your legs off!
I can take it. Great power comes great responsibility. We have a hope.
Get to the chopper! Handy! Just a flesh wound.
I am the father.
It's alive. It's alive.
Something is going to happen. I feel it. I can't get it out of my mind.
You're just nervous.
And welcome back to another episode of the Monster Movie Stompdown. Of course, you got your host, Sludge, here. Co-host across from me
is Mark,
our brother from Texas,
Ruben.
And we are here for our 60th episode. We have hit 60 of these.
It's an anniversary.
Oh, yes. And you know what? It's a great film for this anniversary.
Oh, yes. It's perfect.
I love it.
Perfect.
So we're knocking our way through the Universal Monster films. We've done Creature. We've done Dracula. And now it's a toss-up on my favorite between this one and Creature, but we've hit Frankenstein. I'm a huge fan of this movie.
Sorry about that, Sarge. He shot you down.
I love Creature, man, but they're so different, but I like this one for so many other reasons. Pretty stoked about this film.
I think that's probably why they kicked you out of the protest, right?
I chose Frankenstein over Creature.
That's terrible.
Sarge's like,
that's
I'm
terrible.
done.
Get out.
Yeah.
Just get out.
Nope, not allowed. So, and I'm a big fan of this movie, even though this movie is not drastically, but I mean it is very different than the book in a lot of ways. You know, one of the key ones.
I would say drastically. Yeah, I mean,
there's a lot of changes. You know, I mean, Elizabeth not be getting killed. You know, Frankenstein not dying. You know, there's a lot of stuff. But this one was pretty cool, actually. The movie actually, because in 1931, this is another 31 film. They kind of pushed this one together pretty quick. Universal actually had lost a ton of money before Dracula came out, and when Dracula came out, they ended up profiting like $700,000 or something like that in 31, which was great for them. So Carl Lemuels. I've never been able to pronounce that name right. And they even say his name audibly in the beginning of this movie, and I still can't even do it. But so they decided, okay, we need to start pushing some production for more horror, and immediately. And the next one was Frankenstein. They wanted to do Frankenstein next. And actually, originally, Lugosi was supposed to play Frankenstein's monster, and he looked quite different than what we end up getting on screen. From my understanding, though, there was a lot of issues between the director and Lugosi, because the original director, I can't remember the guy's name. He was on Robert Flory, maybe? No. I can't remember the name of the original director. James Whale directed the film, but they had another director at the time, and there was a lot of issues, and apparently Lugosi ended up, he wanted to play Frankenstein. He didn't want to play Frankenstein's monster, but due to his contract, that was really the only role that they wanted him for. And then there was issues with the makeup and him and the director. And so he ended up getting kicked out off the shoot. There's multiple stories of him leaving voluntarily, but more of what you hear is that he was kicked out off the film. because he got into it with the director. Well, the director ended up getting fired anyways, and they brought in James Whale from England, and they pretty much, the Lee Mills said, you can have the pick of what you want film-wise, and he picked Frankenstein. Now, he's the one who made a lot of the drastic changes to the film, made the Frankenstein's monster more of just a silent killing machine, and brought on the new cast and crew, and of course we got Boris Karloff for Frankenstein's monster ultimately. Actually, and there was, I can't remember the guy's name. There's actually a scene in the movie where Boris is not the monster. It's actually the special effects technician who did a lot of the lighting stuff. Boris was afraid of getting burned from the lighting effects because there was a lot of sparks. Because like his abdomen and stuff is shown, and that guy, the special effects technician, actually is on the table in that scene. So it's actually the only scene that Karloff's not the monster.
Really? Yep. I did not know that one.
Which was a pretty cool little tidbit. So I mean, everyone should know the story of Frankenstein. Yeah, I mean, Victor Frankenstein, the doctor who the book that's about, attempts to create life, attempts to play God, and he takes a bunch of body parts from graveyards and gallows and stitches together a human. And through some experiments with high-powered electricity, he ends up bringing this thing to life. But this thing is a monster. It is not the creation he was hoping for, and it ends up killing his assistant, gets loose, and kind of just goes on a little bit of a rampage in the movie and hunts Frankenstein down, attacks Elizabeth, his fiance, on their wedding day, and it kills a little girl, which we'll talk heavily about that scene in the countryside. Kills, like I said, Fritz, his assistant, or Igor in later films, and he's changed from Fritz back to Igor, and they have to chase him down. Victor says enough's enough, and they form a mob and chase the monster, ultimately up to a windmill, and it's at this point it's Frankenstein and his monster in the windmill with the mob outside, and Frankenstein tries to escape and does not do so, and the monster ends up throwing him over the top ledge of the windmill. Yeah. And he ends up hitting one of the windmill sails, and it's a pretty gruesome scene for 1931. Yes. And as he hits the body hits the windmill seal, it ends up falling to the ground, and it's pretty gruesome and graphic. But he manages to survive, and they carry him back to town while the rest of the mob lights the windmill on fire. And then you see Boris Karloff's the monster just scream in agony as this thing starts blazing up, and he finally ultimately dies. But Frankenstein survives in the movie, not like the book. So there's a lot of differences between the book. We're not going to break into the book, but a lot of differences between the movie and the book itself. Both amazing. The book is absolutely amazing. If you've never read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, it's a classic for a reason. But of course, we got great cast in this one. This movie was made for like $200-something thousand. It ended up grossing total with all of its releases, because we'll break in, because there was multiple releases due to the coding. We've been talking a lot about the coding era, especially with Dracula and stuff, and a lot happened with this film because of the content of the movie, and we'll break into that as we start discussing it some more. But ultimately, the movie ended up making, because it got re-released a couple times from 31 to like 52 or 53, and ended up grossing $12 million. This one was a huge box office hit for Universal. I mean, the biggest of the year, definitely for 31 for them. So did extremely well. And of course, got a great cast. Colin Clive plays Dr. Frankenstein in this. Boris Karloff plays the monster. But two of my favorites return from Dracula for this one. And of course, Dwight Fry, who I absolutely loved as Renfield in Dracula. Yes. He's Fritz in this, or the Igor character, and he's absolutely awesome in this film as well. But then, of course, we get Edward von Sloan. He's Dr. Wadlow, who helps Frankenstein out, and he was Van Helsing in Dracula. He's actually in The Mummy too. So I mean, he's used a lot in most of these classical monster films, and his performance is awesome. Mae Clark plays Elizabeth. She does a phenomenal job in this movie. Everyone does a top-notch job. I mean, for as fast as the production of this movie was, I mean, same year release as Dracula. with the troubles they had starting up the film with the director and then Lugosi. Everyone did outstanding job in this. Outstanding. Even I think it was Frederick Kerr, who played Baron Frankenstein, Victor's dad. He's great. He's just a kook of an old man, and I love him in the movie. But I think he ended up passing away like the next year or a few years later because they were wanting to bring him back. And use him again, like they're do it Edward and Dwight for these other films, but they weren't unable to. But Frankenstein's monster was huge, probably the biggest of the monsters as far as sequels and other films. I mean, because you had several sequels for this one. You had the very next one was Bride of Frankenstein, followed by Son of Frankenstein. Then you had House of Frankenstein. Then he returns again for House of Dracula. I mean, so there's a lot of Frankenstein's monster, and played by pretty much all three of the big guys back then. Karloff plays him for the first several films, so all the direct sequels.
Now, doesn't Karloff do the Abbott and Costello?
No, that's actually
that?
Glenn.
Oh, that's right.
Glenn Strange.
Glenn Strange.
That's
Glenn Strange.
Strange. Yeah.
Because Karloff actually plays another character in that one. But Glenn Strange does the Frankenstein monster because Karloff did the monster for quite a while, but then Lugosi ends up doing House
of Frankenstein.
House of Frankenstein.
I think it's at House.
It was one of the House ones.
Frankenstein.
So Lugosi dons the makeup and is the monster. Then I think it's House of Dracula is the one where Lon Chaney Jr. even does it, and. Is that right? I think it's that one.
I believe so.
Because it was the film before House of Frankenstein, I think. Because either way. So I mean, no, it was because it was. I think maybe House of Dracula came out first. Because I remember knowing that Lon played the wolf or the Frankenstein monsters, but they couldn't play him in the next film because he had to portray the Wolfman for that. And then at that point, when he had to portray the Wolfman, I believe is when Glenn first stepped in as the monster. And then of course Glenn's the monster in Abbott and Costello. Right.
Abbott and Costello. Yeah.
So I mean and Glenn's played a lot of other monster roles too, or these horror films. So I mean having Karloff, Lugosi, Chaney Jr., and Strange all play the monster was pretty cool. I mean, every one of them got a swing at the character. Actually, Lugosi only agreed to play the monster in House of Frankenstein because he liked the character was different. There was actually some actual lines, audible dialogue. And then he portrayed the monster as blind, but they ended up cutting out on the all the dialogue for the monster, which ticked Lugosi off. And then the way they re-edited it, they didn't bring apart him being blind in the film. So interesting role the monster's taken, but this is the one that kicked it all off. I mean, absolutely great cast.
Well, I think if you look at it over a period of time, the monster has been. I mean, it comes right with. When you talk about movies and you talk about scary movies, you talk about those things. Frankenstein always gets brought up.
And he's brought for generations. I mean,
not
only through the Universal horror monster films and the sequels, and then the House films. I mean, the original shared universe before Marvel ever did it. He was also in what's the Rankin Boss animated film, Mad Monster Party. Yeah. He's in it. I mean, the monster's in the Monster Squad.
Well, I mean, and Halloween costumes. I think he even had cereal. Wasn't there a Frankenberry or something like that?
Yeah,
he even had cereal. So I mean, the characters made lots of money over the years.
Oh yeah,
lots of money.
I mean, Universal has been ranking in on that character for a long time. Time.
Yes.
So I mean, did great for Universal. I mean, spawned tons of sequels. There's been, of course, the remakes. You had the Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. You had the Hammer film Frankenstein movies. You even had that one Frankenstein 1960 or 1970. So, I mean, like Dracula. I mean, this is a reoccurring character, but this is the one that started it all. And, man, in my opinion, it's my favorite. It is my favorite of the original Universal. It's so hard to choose between it and Creature because they're such drastic films. This is so much more of a tragedy horror where Creature is just a straight up monster film. You know, I mean, so totally different type of film. But let's jump into it. Am I up first this time around?
Go take it.
All right.
Oh, but before you start, just because our listeners are smart. Bela Lugosi played Frankenstein at Frankenstein versus the Wolfman. It was Glenn Strange for the rest of them.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
So,
because you were right. House of Frankenstein was next. So yeah, it was Frankenstein meets Wolfman, and you're right. That is Lugosi. Then Strange did the House.
I knew something was up because he was hard at work over there.
He looked like
and nothing was coming out. Nothing was coming out of corporate
because
script.
it didn't quite. I'm like, man, you know, I mean, I remember Glenn Strange, and I'm like, man, I don't remember Lugosi, but we're missing Frankenstein, which is one of my favorites too. I love Frankenstein versus the Wolfman, but House of Frankenstein's, you know, that's one of my. I mean, hell, I love them all. Forget about it.
Yeah, they're all so good. All so good.
But we, you know, we got some pretty smart listeners that say, "Hey, wait a minute, you guys don't know your horror movies."
Well,
and
good
man, because for me, they're all so good that I've watched them all several times over.
Mm-hmm.
And they, you know, at my old age, they start running together.
Which one's which?
That's right. And we keep a pretty big catalog of films in the old noggins.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go. It's all yours, Tristan. I just wanted to make sure that we corrected that.
This one, I mean, there's nothing about this movie I don't like. There is not a single scene. Nothing from the very opening sequence. One, when you see Lemuel come out or not Lemuel, but he comes out and gives a little introduction. You've been warned, you know, about the story, and then it just starts off at the gravesite, and you see them burying somebody while Fritz and Frankenstein are kind of off on the side waiting for them to leave so they can start digging up the body. Then they go to the gallows and see a guy hanging, and they cut the body down. I mean, it's dark from the very get-go. I mean, they let you know from the very beginning there's not going to be anything light about this movie, and there's no lighthearted easiness to this film from the word go. And everything to me was just absolutely top notch. All the sets were amazing in this movie. The actors were amazing. I mean, and again, Dwight Frye, I mean, he's got to be one of my favorite actors of the 30s and 40s. He just sells characters so well. I mean, we talked about, I mean, his character's Renfield. I mean, that he made the iconic Renfield laugh, you know, and playing Fritz, which is the Igor character, he did so well. And that character torments the monster. The monster ultimately hangs him and kills him. But he does such a good job in his scenes with Karloff that it's just, you got this massive monster, then you got this little hunchback, and he makes the hunchback just seem so terrible, and you just hate him for what he's doing, even though the monster ultimately is is just as evil. He does a phenomenal job. Edward again as Dr. Wadlow, Edward's awesome. I loved him. I liked him more as Van Helsing, but he's still phenomenal in this. And every character, Colin was great as Frankenstein. Colin's probably my favorite of all the Frankenstein movies, and you get the Victor character.
Henry.
Henry.
They changed it up in the book. In the book, he's Victor.
Yeah, but in the movie, it is Henry.
They changed it. Yeah,
there's several changes in the movie. So Henry Frankenstein, or in the movie, but Victor Frankenstein. Colin's my favorite. Of everybody that's played the role, Colin has always been my favorite Frankenstein. He just captures the moments right, even down to the point to where when they finally get him out of the castle and get him and Elizabeth, and they're sitting there on the patio at his dad's house or whatever, and just that coming back from the madness to the love of his life, he just delivered that scene so unbelievably well.
Yeah.
I mean, he delivers all of his stuff perfectly. And Karloff as the monster is
man.
He said it. I mean, he set the tone for that monster so well that they carried that tone for literally decades. That tone did not change for that character till the remake with Robert De Niro. That's when they made it way more that's as far as movies.
That's when they made it that's the closest to the book.
Yeah, that is the most accurate to the book there is, as far as film. But prior to that film, and that came out in 94, 96, in the 90s, So from 1931 to the 90s, his portrayal, that's what they did for, I mean, decades. That is what everyone tried to capture. He did such a good job of just, he's created, and yet he's got the mind of a criminal, but yet his mind's not functioning more than a 4 or 5-year-old. Victor, or Henry, he even talks about having to develop after a few days. He portrays the character so well because his fear of fire, his not understanding, his desire for freedom, he's got all these emotions. He can't talk. He can make noise, but he has got to be able to show fear. He's got to be able to show power. He's got to be able to show that
anger,
the
anger,
the childlike innocence, but still being a monster. And the greatest scene that's delivered in is the scene with the little girl Maria, which was cut. Immediately cut. Because in the scene, he comes across little Maria next to this lake, and she asks him if he wants to play, and she shows him how to make boats out of these little sunflowers, and they're throwing them in the water together, and so he's runs out, and he looks at her and starts smiling because they're playing together, and he picks her up, and she starts to scream, "You're hurting me," and he throws her in. And then she drowns. Now, this was, of course, pre-code era, or as that was changing, that got cut out, but was later restored because they ended up finding it wasn't restored till like the 80s, because a lot of the time when things were cut, especially in the 30s and 40s, they were cut from the original negative. So a lot of the footage that was cut from films was lost. It was just thrown away. That scene miraculously was found in the 80s in the film archive by complete happenstance. So they're able to restore it. And that to me is the greatest scene there is because he's being completely innocent. There is no malice in the character. He's having fun playing, and he's throwing these beautiful things into the water. But then he looks at this little girl who's a beautiful little girl, and he thinks she can float too. So that's what he does. And when he realizes, because he's reaching for the water, trying to get her out, which she's screaming and drowning, and then he goes from literally being playful to shocked to terrified as he runs away at what just happened. He has no idea he just killed this little girl. No idea. And to me, that single scene, as short as it is the greatest delivered scene in the entire Universal Monster category of the originals. That right there, for me, is what made this one the best of the best. And then, of course, just the tragic ending. It's almost like he doesn't want, in the book, he doesn't. He hates that he's alive and is what he is because Victor created him. That's why he goes and exacts this vengeance on, killing Elizabeth and ultimately Victor himself. So Karloff, he stole it. He delivered this character so well. I have no complaints. The special effects were great on it. Every scene was amazing. There's still a lot of footage from the original cut that was taken out. They actually wanted they wanted to take out so much footage that it would have, I think it was like 32 scenes or 32 minutes worth of this movie it would have cut the movie in half. But ultimately they didn't, but there were still more scenes that were cut. Now, the only one that I know of that was restored was the little girl drowning scene that was found in the 80s. So there was still a lot cut. We never got the full thing. Well, no, I'm sorry. One of the scene was cut was a dialogue line of Henry's. He talks about feeling like God or whatever when he creates the monster.
They felt like it was blasphemous.
Yes.
And and he speaking with Victor, Henry refers to in the name of God, and he's like, now I know how it's like to be God. And those states were like, absolutely no way, no how.
Right.
Cut.
So that was restored. To me, this is, Creature's top notch for me. I love all these Universal monster movies, but this is the only one that tops Creature, and it's really just the tragic horror that this film is, especially with the monster. Because the monsters, it's ultimately not his fault. None of it is.
And another note, it was completely banned in Ireland.
Oh, really?
In 1932 because it was unsuitable for children or nervous people. Said it was demoralizing.
Really? Yeah. I knew it was banned in China.
Yeah.
But I think it was banned in China for something different though, something to deal with like the way the way that they were running their country. Like it fell under a category of film that wasn't allowed to be shown there, of some kind. But it was banned in China. But I didn't know that it was banned in Ireland.
And
like that.
until 1965, then they allowed it. To be
Really?
played.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first movies probably to be banned.
Oh, definitely had to be.
Yeah, because I can't think of anyone. I mean,
Yeah, 31.
31.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't think of anything else.
I can't think of anything else.
So, but I mean, that's
31.
no complaints. I absolutely love this movie. This is my favorite of the Universal monsters. I love the story itself, anyways. I love the portrayal from every actor in this film, and having three of my favorites from that time frame, with Karloff and with Dwight and Edward. I love all three of them. Because I love Karloff and so many other things. I mean, I don't know if it's a movie we would actually do because it's not technically a monster film, but the Black Cat with with Karloff and Lugosi, that's the epitome of both of their careers, in my opinion. Because I mean, you see them go toe to toe as Frankenstein and Dracula, but they're not Frankenstein and Dracula in this. I mean, they're literally one's a psychotic serial killer, and the other one is a vengeful husband whose wife was murdered by the psychotic serial killer, and it's crazy. I mean, that movie is. I mean, seeing them, it's like seeing two geniuses going toe to toe. You know what I mean? It would be like seeing what's James Spader's character from Blacklist.
Well, I can't think what his name is. Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, though, right?
Yes.
Okay. So seeing him go up against like Hannibal Lecter. I mean, those two genius minds going toe to toe. That's one of the greatest movies ever.
We may have to do that one.
Oh man, that movie is phenomenal.
We
watch.
just throw it in.
Yeah. And really true. And it is about who's the bigger monster. It really is. Is it Karloff or is it, Lugosi? I mean, and that's, I mean, that predates, Freddy versus Jason or anything like that you'd ever want to see. And it can never be touched. It can never be touched. But I mean, so I love these actors. I love this movie. Frankenstein. I mean, I no faults in this with me whatsoever.
Yeah.
Whichever one you guys want to go next.
I think, as far as the Universal Monster movies, I mean, with the last one and with Dracula and stuff, didn't know that there was a Spanish version until we did that. Then you had kind of mixed emotions. But when it comes to Frankenstein, I mean, and excuse me, like we were talking earlier, it was the money that's brought by this character. I mean, it's just been amazing. And with this original movie, I think, and you're right, the sets are fantastic. The scene with the windmill is just phenomenal. And
that's just that whole sequence is forever stable in my mind.
And you almost you get to, the monster is a character that you begin to feel sorry for him and almost a compassion for him, even though he's the monster.
Yeah.
And just the way you were explaining who he was, how he was made, his thoughts, and then for Karloff just to be able to get all that across with just grunting and making sounds on what he was dealing with and what he was going through, makes you really start to feel for him. And I think that's a part of his popularity had to deal with that. How Boris Karloff really brought that the monster to life. I mean, I think in the movie, scenes were great, sets were great, the acting was fantastic, just absolutely fantastic. And it definitely is,
especially for the production time. Like I'm still floored with how quickly they put this movie into production and how great a performance they got from these people.
Exactly.
Yes.
Short period of time, and look what they put out.
And they definitely a high quality movie for a time when you don't have the computer graphics. You don't have. I mean, it's just them doing it, and so much physical work going into this movie is such a. Just if you think about it, when you watch the movie in that aspect, what they're doing, what these people are putting together, this type of entertainment, man, it's a perfect movie.
Yeah, it really is.
It is. So I'm good, Ruben. You just go right ahead, sir.
All right, man. You guys covered a lot. This is one of the most perfect movies I've ever seen. Now, I know I said that creature was my favorite, and it is. But this movie is perfect in every way. I mean, the portrayal of the monster was just his screams of agony, his faces that he's make when he's being tortured by Fritz, or when he's when they open the door because they're gonna inject him to put him to sleep, because he just killed Fritz. Just the faces that he makes, suspicious, anger, suspicion, scared. um he just runs the gamut, and he just does it so perfectly. This movie is so perfect. It's got a moral to it. This is what happens when you try to play God.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was original. I believe one of the titles was the modern day Prometheus.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was,
Right,
I think it was
so-
Frankenstein or the modern day Prometheus. I think it was
Prometheus,
Yeah.
right? So this had this. Prometheus in Greek mythology was the one who brought fire and life to us. Is basically what the Greek mythology of Prometheus is, and the symbolism, like in a cemetery, it starts right off. Henry's digging the grave, and I don't know if you guys noticed this, but there's a Grim Reaper statue right behind him.
Yeah.
What it's doing and he throws dirt on the Grim Reaper.
Yeah.
As
that's
to
right.
say, he throws dirt on the Grim Reaper, as to say, I'm going to beat you. I'm throwing dirt in your face because I'm going to bring these guys to life. This guy to life, And I said, man, it's just right off the bat. It's crazy how much symbolism there is. I loved everything about it. I love the laboratory set.
It
with
is so
with
great
all
looking.
the Jacob's ladders and Tesla coils, and all kinds of stuff just going on in the background. It was just perfect.
If I'm not mistaken, Ruben, didn't Nikolai Tesla supply the actual coil for that movie?
He might have. I think
I remember him of course they were
I've-
starting to put those into production, but I think he's the one
Yeah.
who brought it. He made that one and brought it to the movie.
He,
if I'm not
that's
mistaken.
and delivered it to him.
Yeah.
That is very cool if that's true. There was more symbolism, like when they went to go visit the doctor, because they're trying to figure out what's going on with Henry Frankenstein, and you go into his office, and his office is half alchemist, half scientist.
Yeah.
He's got test tubes, and he's got skulls, and he's got books, and he's got all kinds of stuff, and he's like, it tells you where they were with medicine at the time. And it was a good comparison, because really medicine at that time was partly alchemist, and that's what Henry was shooting for. Without touching on the book, the reason Henry, or Victor in the book, Henry does all of this is because this doctor said that we need to do better. In the book, he says we need to do better. We expect more of everybody else, but we should expect more from ourselves, which was the spark for Victor in the book, for Victor to say, you know what, I am going to do better. I'm going to beat death. So it was so cool to see that. It's just, it even had a little bit of comedy relief with Fritz and his little limp going up and down the stairs, pulling up his sock, when he's telling people to go away.
Yeah, well, I said that line when Elizabeth and them come up to the door right as they start the experiment, and he says that line, "Who is it?" At the door.
Yeah.
Well, they use that multiple times, all the way up to Mel Brooks's Young Frankenstein.
Young Frankenstein.
Yeah. That was kind of a big joke in that
Yeah.
movie. It's great in this one too.
And the moral of the story is, you look what you brought to life, but and this is just my opinion, but you brought somebody to life and he has no soul. His soul is gone.
Yep.
You brought something to life, and that's been echoed over and over again. Man, Pet Cemetery echoes that sentiment. Have you seen either one of the Pet Cemeteries?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, and it's not his fault. He's the monster And yeah, he's violent because he has the in the movie here, he has the brain of a criminal. And in 31, it was just determined, hey, if you're a criminal, you have this kind of brain, and if you're a good person, you have this kind of brain. So he's a criminal. He's got a criminal mind, but it's not his fault. You know that what he does, you're terrified of him, but at the same time you feel sorry for him.
Yeah.
Because none of what happened was really his fault. You know, they created him, they brought him back. You know, he was at peace. Whoever this person was before was at peace, most likely. You know, I know it was a criminal, but who knows? But
Well,
in the
multiple
brain
people.
part,
I mean, he's got
Yeah.
multiple.
yeah,
people
multiple.
there.
There's multiple people. These people were all at peace, but all those multiple people do not equal one soul.
Right.
Right.
So
Right.
you know the number one problem with, for me, in my opinion, the number one problem Frankenstein's monster had was not that he was created, but he was created and he had no soul.
Yep.
So he was already
And that
negative 500.
that aspect I think is correct where you're coming from with that, because I mean that's played out in a lot of other the films, even into graphic novel areas. When you look at I Frankenstein, that's his biggest struggle. Not so much being created, because I mean the story, and if you've never read the I Frankenstein graphic novels, maybe you've seen the movie with Aaron Eckhart, Frankenstein versus gargoyles or with gargoyles versus demons. You know, great movie, or fun movie, I should say, and great graphic novels. But I mean, it starts hundreds of years after he's created. Victor's already gone, you know, and you kind of get a little prologue of him, and his name's Adam, and his whole internal struggle through the movie is he has no soul. And that's, you know, I mean, and that's a major part of that, I think, because I mean, we play God in this movie, but only God can create the soul.
Right.
We can't. And when we try to play God, not only can we not create a soul, but the price and cost.
It's his breath. He breathes it into us.
Yeah. And because of that, the cost of that attempt is so drastic. I mean, the amount of death that comes from it, you know, just to try and create one life, you lose dozens of others, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ruben, go ahead.
Yeah. So no, but and you know, so that resonated with me. That's the part that resonated with me, and that's what made me feel sorry for him. Because even what you say, this great scene with that little girl, he meant her no harm.
Yeah.
What happened was, it was a complete accident. If you know, because he didn't know any better. You know, it's like you. I think you compared him to a toddler. It's like a toddler doesn't know that he's not supposed to go and bite somebody in the, you know, the leg.
Right.
He just goes and does it. You know, he doesn't mean any harm. He's just a toddler, and he's learning right from wrong at that age, you know. And that's where the monster's predicament is. He's learning right from wrong. I mean, in his mind, he killed Fritz, but Fritz tortured him. So in his mind, all he's doing is getting even.
And stopping the pain.
Stopping the pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He's stopping the source of this torture.
Exactly.
You know, and I still think he does have understanding, because he hates Henry Frankenstein for what he did and for creating him, and wants to exact his revenge on him. You know, and so it's just so great. This movie is perfect from beginning to end. And you were talking about things they cut out. They also added a bunch of things to this movie. Like Henry and Elizabeth were supposed to both die in this movie. They added scenes later because they thought the ending would be too grim if they killed them off. So from what I read, when he comes into that room, he kills Elizabeth. Apparently she's thrown, if you remember the scene, she's thrown on the bed.
Yeah.
And she's out. She's supposed to be dead. And that's what was supposed to happen in the movie. Then in the windmill, they were supposed to both die in the fire. They came back and created that scene where he gets thrown off and survives. I mean, they were both supposed to both die. I don't remember exactly if he threw him off and he dies.
I
or
think
if he was supposed to die in a fire.
I think he threw him off. 'Cause I think I remember reading that one. I don't remember
Yeah.
hearing about
Yeah,
Elizabeth.
and
Um,
then they came back and they added the scene at the end where he's recovering, Elizabeth's alive, and it's a happy ending, you know. But originally they didn't have any of that. The studio said this is too grim, and I guess in the test screenings it didn't work out too well because they even added that prologue,
Yeah.
prologue in the beginning. There was no prologue in the original screening that was shown, test screening. And so it opens up in the graveyard where they're digging up a grave. So they thought maybe they needed some explanation, so they added that in there. So this movie in 1931 was quite controversial. I mean, there was a lot of things the studio did to this movie for us to get an hour and 10 minutes that we get now.
Yeah.
It wasn't so. I mean, this movie is only an hour and 10 minutes, but so much happens in that hour.
Oh,
and
yeah.
10
Oh
minutes.
yeah. You were
You know,
captivated from the word
Oh, yeah.
go.
yeah,
Definitely.
Until the end.
You're just like, wow, this whole, I remember thinking this is only an hour and 10 minutes.
Yep.
And I'm like, wow, but there's so much to talk about. Because at first I thought, man, it's only an hour and 10 minutes. How are we going to, but there's an hour and 10 minutes, but there's literally hours of discussion on this movie that we could do. I mean, we could go on and on about it. Lack of a soundtrack, which made it even more eerie.
Mm-hmm.
In this instance, this movie did not need a soundtrack.
Yeah, it was perfect.
It was fine.
It was perfect.
It was perfect how it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just didn't need it.
Yeah, because you never even think about it.
Right.
Watching it,
Exactly.
you never once go, "Hey, there's no music," and that was, I think, that was a perfect decision. Perfect decision.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it worked out perfect. So, I mean, there is nothing about this movie, and I doubt that there's any listeners out there that have never seen it. But hopefully, after hearing this podcast, you'll look at it maybe in a different light, or maybe take another look at it and look at all the symbolism that's there that maybe you didn't see before. Because it's just a great movie. It is. A lot of times when they make a movie and it's based on a book, they ruin it. And I'm not saying the movie is better than the book, but the book is a hard read. If you've read it?
I've read it.
Have you both read it? To me, it was a hard read because it kind of bounces around a little bit. It was a hard read. And this movie just flowed so good, even though it's not even close to the book. I mean, it's not, well, it is. The framework of the book is there.
Yeah.
But it's just so much enjoyable. I mean, the movie's so much more enjoyable for me to watch than reading the book. And not because the book is bad. It's just a hard read for me personally. It was a hard read. And I really can't think of anything negative about this movie. It's just a downright perfect movie. I'm sure, I haven't looked, but I'm sure it's one of the 100 movies you have to watch before you die.
Oh yeah,
I'm
it's
sure
on the list. It's on several top 100 lists of films.
Yeah, I'm sure it's on that list. I'm sure. Creature from the Black Lagoon may not be on there, but I know Frankenstein would be on there.
And Frankenstein's it's one of the few films that holds 100% on Rotten Tomato.
Yeah.
I mean, it's well worth it. I mean, it's
and
so good.
And man, kudos to Universal. Their stable of actors that they had in that time was incredible.
Oh
even their bit actors were top notch. I mean, think about it. Both Cheneys, Lugosi, Karloff. I mean,
Strange,
good Lord.
Fry.
Strange, yeah. I mean, God, you're like, man, look at this stable of actors. Carradine, right?
Carradine.
Right? David Carradine.
Well, yeah, because
Carradine
that's who took over the role of Dracula, after Lugosi. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Carradine was great, man.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, man, Universal really had it going on. I mean, they just, for the genre that we like so much, I mean, can't get any better than that. You can't get any better than Universal Monster in that era.
Now, where they went wrong because they keep screwing it up over the last decade or so is beyond me.
Yeah.
They had it right from the beginning.
They have it right. They have the blueprint sit right in front of them.
Yeah.
They just, I don't know if they just want to change it up because they don't want to be called, you know, copycats or whatever. But man, you have the framework there to make an excellent movie. You just have to find the right actors.
Yep. And right director.
And that they did for a while.
Yeah.
So
But then they lost it along the way somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere it got lost.
So
yeah, but that's all I got, man. And you know, I think I covered. This is the very few times. I don't know if our listeners know this, but 9 times out of 10, I don't even take any notes. I watch the movie, I make a mental note, and I just sit and I just talk and I BS for the whole show. This is the first time that I said I need to take notes because I don't want to miss anything. And I actually have my little spiral notebook out, and I wrote down everything I wanted to say because I did not want to miss anything. I sat there with my notebook and made all kinds of notes. And it was, you know, like I said, I usually like to sit there and just kind of take in the movie. And this time I actually took notes. So that's how much I want everybody to know that how good this movie is.
The movie's absolutely phenomenal. I mean, phenomenal.
Yeah.
One scene I forgot to mention, well, actually it happens twice, and I love it both times, is when they're chasing the monster down, and the mobs kind of separated themselves from Henry, and then Henry comes up on the monster, and they have this stare down. Where I'm just like, dude, it's like that stare down between Rocky and Drago, you know, in Rocky 4. It's just,
I know.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, and then in the windmill, when
and they do it again in the windmill
on top.
Yep.
Oh, that's incredible because that thing's turning and they're looking at each other to that cog. That cog. Oh man, I'm like, you know, that's a classic scene too. I mean, it's just like,
I mean, especially
one of us is not walking out of here.
Yes, exactly.
You know,
I mean, especially there in the windmill and that cog. I mean, that's the look on Henry and the monster's faces. One of us is dying. Yeah. One of us is not coming out of this alive, and it's awesome, man. Yeah. It's such a good movie, and I think that's the first time that type of, because you see that sequence between two characters. You know, I mean, we talked, you know, just mentioned a minute ago, Rocky and Drago. You see that between so many characters and so many movies across all kinds of genres. You know, especially horror, action, sci-fi. You know, I mean, even Ripley and the Queen Alien. You know, I mean, when she comes out. In that the suit she's in, you know, that she's in, you know, the get away from her, you line, like that's that look between the two of them. One of them's coming out of this alive. This was the first time. This was the first time on film we ever got that experience.
That's terrible.
Oh yeah,
I mean, it's incredible.
It's phenomenal. So I mean, look, guys, if you've most likely seen this. If you have, go back and watch it again with some of the things we said and see. Hopefully, it brings some things to light to you, looking at it a little differently. If you haven't seen it, you're doing yourself no favors by not watching this movie.
Yeah,
I mean, yes, you got to watch this.
I feel like this is one of the ones we've been very excited.
I don't know that you can be a horror fan if you haven't seen this.
You can't call yourself. There's no way. If you were a horror fan and you've never seen this, you are not a horror fan.
You've got to see it.
Yeah.
No, you know, you can be one of those ones like, oh yeah, but I saw this rare film. It doesn't matter. If you haven't seen, any of the original Universal's horrors, but this one particular, you know what I mean? It's all, like Dracula and this are the staples.
Well, and I think, and I know this is our 60th episode.
Yes.
Is this their first time that we're 5 right across the board?
No. Godzilla 54 was 5.
Oh,
50,
my bad. Yes,
so this is one of the very few times.
Oh, yeah. Because this movie
we don't give out fives. I think maybe Alien.
I think Alien and Godzilla 54
and the Thing got a 5. I think,
yeah. So very few movies have gotten 5s.
But this one definitely is.
Oh, there was no question.
A 5 that has to be seen. You have to call. You know, you have to watch the movie to call yourself a horror fan. You have to.
Yeah. And we are extremely picky. I mean, we'll sit here and go, okay, so what did I give this film? Because you know that we've done previously. Because I need to think about what I'm giving the one we're watching now. You know, and that was one of the things that was so hard with Creature for me, because I'm like, what do I give Creature? Because I knew what I was giving Frankenstein. There was no question. You know what I mean? And
for me, it was no big deal because for me, they're both getting 5. They both got 5s for me.
Well, you know,
reasons,
even when we talked prior, you know, to this recording, it was pretty simple. Well, what are we doing? At
Oh, yeah.
5? It was just like
Oh, yeah.
5. That was it. I
For
mean, it
those
was not-
listening, before we start the show, we're usually talking for a good 20 minutes before we even start recording. We'll get our ratings down, and then we'll average them up, and we'll spend 10-15 minutes, not maybe 15 minutes, but 10 minutes at least, talking about the ratings.
Yeah.
We talked about the rating for this film for maybe 30 seconds.
Yeah.
We all knew.
Yeah.
It was
5.
without question.
There's this
Straight across.
There's no doubt. So.
Yes.
So if you haven't seen this movie, one, you can't call yourself a horror or monster movie fan until you do, but you need to see it. I mean, we're telling you, this is one of the, there's movies we review that we encourage, and if you don't see it, it ain't going to, really matter. This is one of the few where we're like, you have to see this film. This is a have to for any movie lover of any genre, let alone our genre. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
Exactly.
anything else you guys want to state on this one?
I'm good over here.
No, I'm good here.
All right. Well, man, guys, thank you so much again for listening to this one. And if you couldn't tell from the excitement in our voice about this movie, go watch it. But we'll be back in 2 weeks again for another Godzilla film. Next up, we've got Godzilla Final Wars. We're ending out the Millennium series. And then we'll start trucking up to, oh, crap. Did we?
What?
No, wait.
Uh-oh.
Did we decide the anime films? We'll do 2014 and then the anime, because we're going to do the animated films. But don't worry, we're just going to do it all in one episode, the whole trilogy. They are feature length. I know
Thank goodness.
Yeah,
because
Ruben's like, yes.
I'm going to tell you right now that that anime film, and I think I'd rather watch Godzilla 98, man. That's
That's
how much I do
bold
not like it, man.
statement there,
Okay,
sir.
Do not like the anime. I don't. You know,
man.
I am with you. I am with you, but I don't.
Sneak preview. It's my Titanic. It's my RoboCop. It's
wow.
my
Wow. He is on it. He is on it.
It'll be interesting when we get to we start, in that episode, talk about the third film, especially because I think
I'm gonna have to go buy me a caffeine drink to stay up to watch those again. It's all right. Let's just put it that way.
So, that'll be interesting to get to. So yes, we'll have Final Wars is the next one, and then we'll start trekking through 2014, then the animes, and then the last few. We're getting close to the end of Godzilla films. We'll be caught up to what's really going on. And then of course after that, the next Universal monster movie we've only got 2 left of the originals.
Yeah.
We got the Mummy and the Invisible Man. Which we debated whether or not to even do the Invisible Man, but you can't do the originals without doing it.
It's kind of like when you talk about Universal monsters, that is the original. And Phantom of the Opera, and we went we did Phantom
you just
of the
gotta
Opera.
do.
Yeah.
You gotta do it. Gotta do it. I mean, the one thing it's got going for it, and we'll get to it when we get to it, is Claude Rains. Thankfully, Claude is in it, which we'll introduce him when we get to that movie, because he needs to be introduced because he was another big name back then. So, but yeah, Final Wars is next, and then after that we got the Mummy, and then we'll keep on trekking. So, and once we get through the Universal originals, we're going to take some time to figure out what we want to do next. We may do a poll and see what you guys think. Maybe have you guys do a request or give you a couple of options and see what you guys want to do. But other than that, man, we cannot wait to talk to you guys again for the next Godzilla film. It's going to be crazy. It is. It is. Ryuya Kitamura, who is one of my all-time favorite directors in the director chair, just said, we're going to go balls to the wall on this one, boys. And he definitely did. Dawn Fry, mutants, Matrix, a butt ton of monsters. It's awesome. So
Gonna be good.
Tuna eaters. Don't forget about the tuna eaters.
Oh yeah, the tuna eaters in it. It's gonna be good. So, all right. Well, thank you guys again so much for listening. This is Sludge
And Mark.
And Ruben.
Y'all have a good night.
Good night.
Night, y'all.
We have a call. Get to the chopper!